What up, peeps? Your friendly neighborhood Monomachos here, speaking to you from the road, and not from stately Monomachos Manor. Anyway, there's a lot of things going on. I'm going to do two videos and essays about the recent summit in Helsinki. Um, Actually, about Russia. The first one will be about Helsinki, and let's get right to it. In case you didn't know, back up. In case you didn't know, I'm fixing to go to Russia. Anyway, so this is a kind of a perfect storm opportunity, so to speak. Anyway, I came across this excellent essay written by David Goldman. He goes by the moniker Spengler, and he's a realist conservative. Used to be a neoconservative. I uh, I agree with his take on history for the most part. He's a little too much of a Zionist to my tastes, and but when he talks about other things, other nations, sometimes he's right on the money. I have a problem with him about the war between the states, and I'll discuss it another time. But anyway, what does Mr. David Goldman say? This was published today. The title is Once Again, President Trump is Magnificently Right, this time about Russia. I'm just going to tease it a little bit here. I don't want to make this too long. I'm going to highlight it so you can read it for yourself. It's very good. President Trump offended the entire political spectrum with a tweet this morning blaming the U.S. for poor relations with Russia. Our relationship with Russia has never been worse thanks to the many years of U.S. foolishness and stupidity, the president said, and he's entirely correct. By this, I do not mean to say that Russia is a beneficent actor in world affairs or that President Putin is an admirable world leader. Nonetheless, the president displayed both perspicacity and political courage when he pointed the finger at the United States for mismanaging the relationship with Russia. That's the first paragraph. This is interesting. Second paragraph. Full disclosure. I was a card-carrying member of the neoconservative cabal that planned to bring Western-style democracy and free markets to Russia after the fall of communism. As chief economist for the supply-side consulting firm Polyconomics, I got an appointment as an advisor to Boris Yeltsin's finance ministry and made several trips to Moscow. Of course, the finance ministry really was a family office for Yeltsin's oligarch friends, who were too busy stealing Russia's economy to listen to advice. The experience cured me of the neoconservative delusion that democracy and free markets are the natural order of things. Around that time, I was where he was. Francis Fukuyama's thesis that liberal democracy is the natural end state of history. Nothing could be further from the truth. I'm glad to see that David Goldman is now owning up to his folly. I know people who know him, and he has been disdainful for many years of neoconservatism, both personally and in his writings. And I'm glad that he's owned up to it. I have as well. Alrighty. Unfortunately, the delusion that the United States would remake Russia in its own image persisted through the Bush and Obama administrations. I have no reason to doubt the allegations that a dozen Russian intelligence officers meddled in the U.S. elections of 2016, but this was the equivalent of a fraternity prank compared to America's long-standing efforts to intervene in Russian politics. That pretty much is the money quote, isn't it, folks? The United States supported the 2014 Maidan uprising in Ukraine and the overthrow of the Yanukovych government in the hope of repeating the exercise in Moscow some years later. Then Assistant Secretary of State Victoria Nuland pulled whatever strings America had to replace the feckless and corrupt Viktor Yanukovych with a government hostile to the Kremlin. She didn't say it in so many words, but she hoped that the Ukraine coup would lead to the overthrow of Vladimir Putin. Evidently, Nuland and her boss, Hillary Clinton, thought that the Ukraine coup would deprive Russia of its Black Sea naval base in Crimea, and did not anticipate that Russia would simply annex an old Russian province that belonged to Ukraine by historical accident. The Russians know how to play chess, folks. They know how to play chess. At that time, liberal opinion evanesced with the notion that Moscow would follow Maidan. The Christian Science Monitor reported that in 2014 that basically everybody is going to rise up in Russia and overthrow the big bad Vlad because democracy, because reasons. Of course, no such thing occurred. The Maidan coup was the second American attempt to install a Ukrainian government hostile to Moscow. The first occurred in 2004 when Condoleezza Rice was Secretary of State rather than Hillary Clinton. As I wrote in Asia Times a decade ago, on the night of November 22, 2004, then Russian President, now Premier Vladimir Putin, watched the television news in his dacha near Moscow. People who were with Putin that night report his anger and disbelief at the unfolding Orange Revolution in Ukraine. They lied to me, Putin said bitterly of the United States. I'll never trust them again. The Russians still can't fathom why the West threw them over a potential strategic alliance for Ukraine. They underestimate the stupidity of the West. Okay, American efforts to promote a democratic opposition to Putin have failed miserably. And as John Lloyd recently at Reuters wrote, the Russian president remains genuinely popular. This remains a source of perpetual frustration for neoconservatives, who cannot fathom why dictatorships still exist. No one talks about Ivan the Reasonable. Compared to Peter the Great or Alexander II, let alone Stalin or Ivan the Terrible, Putin is one of Russia's gentler heads of state. I attempted to explain this in this 2016 essay for Asia Times, and he hyperlinks. Russia is in crisis, but Russia is always in crisis. Russia has a brutal government, but Russia always has had a brutal government. And by every indication, the people of Russia nonetheless seem to like their government. If they wanted a different sort of government, let them establish one. What sort of government they prefer is not the business of the United States. America's attempt to shape Russia's destiny, starting with the Clinton administration's sponsorship of the feckless, drunk, and corrupt Boris Yeltsin, had baleful results. So did the State Department's attempts to manipulate events in Ukraine in 2004 and 2014. Now, he doesn't have starry eyes. He says, I'm no Russophile. I'm an old cold warrior. I don't like Putin. I don't even like Dostoevsky or Tolstoy. I don't especially like Tchaikovsky or Mussorgsky. I don't like drinking Russian style, get as drunk as you can, as fast as you can. I like a lot of individual Russians that have guts and tell you what they think. I'm so leery of Putin's machinations in Europe that I prefer Angela Merkel to the Putin-friendly German right wing. Nevertheless, it was America that made a mess of relations with Russia, and President Putin's tweet this morning was right on the mark. You can usually gauge the merits of this president's public statements by the decibel level of the protests. I'll let you read the rest. The screaming was just intolerable. John Brennan, an apostate, Muslim convert, a true deep stater who was the head of the CIA, came out and screamed on MSNBC that Trump is a traitor and that we need to impeach him. This from a man who cast his first vote in 1976 for Gus Hall, the chairman of the American Communist Party. This from a man who later went to Saudi Arabia to learn Arabic and by all indications put off his Christianity and converted to Islam. This from a man who guided the CIA during the darkest time in our history, the Obama administration. And then you had Anderson Cooper, lightweight, screaming, and you had neoconservatives and warmongers, the usual suspects. I'd say Trump is lucky in his enemies, and so is Putin. And I'm really gratified that they got off on the right start. If I can go back to this, I just want to digest what it is We see Russia as, well, they say they only have 1/10 the economy of the United States, one half the army, all this. All that's true as far as it goes. But look at what they've gained over the years. Okay, they got the Ukraine to denuclearize. Um, they they lost Ukraine per se as far as Yanukovych, but then that was supposed to deprive them of the Crimea, and they got the Crimea. Um, their economy is far better than it was during the 90s. By all indications, the people are happier with Putin in charge. They're still operating under the sanctions, which are a bite, but are they going to give up the sanctions? Um, are we going to give up the sanctions against them so that we can get Crimea back? It's not worth it. Russia's played it masterfully, folks. And Trump, to his credit, he didn't give up anything either. I mean, from the screaming of the people, the elite, you would think that Trump gave Russia back Alaska. Nothing. The sanctions are still in place. Okay. The NATO is still in force. Trump got all the countries to pony up 2% of their GDP for military budget. The United States has lost nothing, folks. The good thing is, neither has Russia. So, that's it for now. I really wanted to put this out because I thought it was important. And, one other thing. I don't think Trump is going to pay a political price for this. Now, why do I say that? Excuse me. Did Obama pay a political price in 2012 when, on that hot mic moment, he told President Medvedev that, tell Vladimir that once the election is over, I'm going to have a lot more flexibility, just to be patient? That should have been a killer right there. But Obama didn't pay a price. Why? Because unlike our elite, our neoconservative, neoliberal, corporatist elite, the American people are tired of war. And they sure as hell don't want war with Russia. They may not like Putin. They don't even like Orthodox Christians. They may think we're all a bunch of idol worshippers. Doesn't matter. The average red state mother, the average American mother doesn't want any more wars. Doesn't want to see her sons going off to die in the deserts because of democracy. So I don't think Trump is going to pay a price. In fact, I think he's going to get even more popular. Now, the elite are going to scream and yell. Who cares? We don't listen to them. They've screwed up this world so big, so many times. We are the only country in the world in which, if you're a member of the establishment, if you fail miserably, even if you have literally blood on your hands like Hillary Clinton, not a damn thing is going to happen to you. If you work at a 7-Eleven, if you work in a pharmacy, if you're a physician, if you're a garbage man, if you work for a living, if you screwed up like these people did, you'd be living under a bridge. But not our elite. Anyway, enough for now. I'll have another post later this week before I head off to Russia. Pax vobiscum. Let's try to love one another. До свидания.